Bienvenido a
Test.
todos. Welcome, Comadres and friends. I am the project manager for Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. And on behalf of our leadership team, we are delighted to have you join us tonight for our podcast as we celebrate our 20th anniversary. For 2 decades, it has honored and Latin authors, connect readers across the country, and foster a vibrant literary community. Your continued support has made this journey possible, and we look forward to many more years of creating great books and powerful voices together. We'd also like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us through our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Live. Tonight, we are thrilled to feature outstanding authors and editors. Please join us in welcoming Cynthia Bejarano, Cristina Morales, and Natalie Guerrero. Before we begin, quick housekeeping. Please keep yourselves on mute during the program. You're welcome to keep your videos on if you like. We do suggest using speaker view, though gallery view works as well. If you have any questions or comments, please place them in the chat and we will do our best to address them during the conversation. And now to begin, let's take a moment to reflect on the history of our book club. Take it away, Nydia.
Thank you, Comadre Test. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome, Comadres and friends. My name is Nydia Marcella, and I'm the book club membership coordinator. Our book club began in July 2004 in an apartment, the apartment of our dear Maria Ferrer here in New York City. But after a brief pause, Nora Comstock reimagined and relaunched the organization nationwide. Her vision was to promote Latina authors and bring our community into bookstores and support our writers. In October of 2006, we began hosting teleconferences, and now in our 20th year, we continue to share work by Latina authors with book lovers everywhere. Our book club and podcast are designed to encourage everyone, not just Latinos, to read more Latino literature, explore diverse cultural perspectives, and gain deeper insights into Latino roots and heritage. We are creating a space where readers can explore the rich inner worlds of Latino writers through their written work. We currently have book clubs in 12 cities across different time zones, and we invite you to join the local chapter that fits your schedule. If your city isn't represented, we welcome your help in starting a new club. For more information, you can visit our website, latinalit.com, and I will put that in the chat. So please spread the word and invite others to join our literary community. Okay, Comadre Karen, take it away.
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our March 2026 podcast. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our first interview is with Cynthia Bejarano, a native of southern New Mexico and Regents Professor in Gender and Sexuality Studies and the College of Arts and Sciences Dan Fulton Endowed Chair at New Mexico State University. Since joining NMSU in 2001, Cynthia has written on feminicides and other forms of violence in El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, and southern New Mexico. She co-edited Frontera Madrehood, Brown Mothers Challenging Oppression and Transborder Violence at the U.S.-Mexico Border with Cristina Morales, 2024. Bejarano also co-edited with Margot Tamez and Jeff Shepard, Gathering Together, We Decide, Archives of Memory, Dispossession, and Resistance in Nade Homelands, published by the University of Arizona Press in 2025. And also being interviewed is Cristina Morales, a professor of sociology at the University of Texas at El Paso, UTEP, and a scholar on Latina, Latino, Latinx communities in the U.S.-Mexico border. Her work illuminates the structural forces shaping migration, policing and criminalization, labor, and everyday experiences of violence in border regions. She is the co-author with Dr. Rogelio Sáenz of Latina, Latinos in the United States, Diversity and Change, 2015 and 2025, a foundational text in Latina, Latino, Latinx Studies with Dr. Cynthia Bejarano. She co-edited Frontera Madrehood, Brown Mothers Challenging Oppression and Transborder Violence at the U.S.-Mexico Border. Interviewing Cynthia and Cristina is Maria Duarte Appleman, who was born in Guatemala and came to the U.S. at 5 years old. After earning a PhD in bacteriology and completing a fellowship in clinical microbiology, she became a professor at the University of Southern California School of Medicine and director of clinical microbiology at USC Los Angeles County Medical Center. Today she is retired and writes murder mystery stories. Take it away, Comadre Maria.
Thank you. I am so pleased for the opportunity to speak to you both, Cynthia and Cristina, about this such an important book. And I think it will impact the views of life on the Mexico-US border. Okay. Now, I wondered please tell us what you mean by Frontera Madrehood. Should I say, Cristina, would you want to answer that?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today, and especially to talk to other Latina comadres is something that is very special to us. So I wanted to say that before going into Frontera Madrehood. Frontera Madrehood encapsulates three concepts. Frontera, meaning the geopolitical border, right, that separates the United States and Mexico, but it's also the cultural and the social and the psychological boundaries that are formed in society. In terms of madre, of course, referring to mothering and the Latino world. But we also think of madre in a more broader sense. We try to contest very restrictive conceptualization of what mothering is, so that it also encapsulates non-essentializing, non-binary, but also the practice of raising and protecting Latinos and Latinos more broadly. And the hood part is about the space, it's about the spaces of the borderland, right? Which is also, we make reference as to the barrio, right? The hood being our neighborhoods, our barrio hood, if you could say. So Frontera Madrehood is the book that's very much place-based, in this case, in the U.S.-Mexico border.
Right. Now, you keep talking about the Mexico-US border. What makes that area so different from other parts of the United States?
Cynthia, do you want to?
Hi, everyone. Buenas tardes or buenas noches. It's great to see everyone. And again, like my comadre, Maria Cristina mentioned, we're both just really delighted to be here with all of you. Thank you for this opportunity and introducing us to this incredible network that Mila Rios Micuchin, one of your members, introduced us to. So we're really eternally grateful for this opportunity to make connections and break bread with all of you. So the idea of the US-Mexico border, I think for so many, if you're not situated in this geopolitical space, as Cristina mentioned, there's a lot said about it. It's a foreign concept to so many people if you've never visited. There have been scholars that have written about it, like of course the iconic Gloria Anzaldúa that wrote the book that is cited anytime there's reference by a Latina scholar about the US-Mexico border. And in thinking of what this means, it's really the 1,954 miles of this human-made and primarily man-made border lands or border lines includes practices that are truly unique to these regions, like the transmothering that we reference in our book. The ideas of crossing borders for some families and some mothers in particular on a daily basis, crossing their children, let's say mixed status families that live on the Mexican side of the border that have U.S. citizen children that attend school in the United States in places like El Paso, Texas. That is clearly a very unique set of circumstances. Or children that are crossing to see a deported family member, a father, for instance, which is another
Yeah.
chapter in our book. So the idea also of, as you would, I think, really appreciate, Maria, the idea of affordable healthcare and what that means. And so for so many people along the U.S.-Mexico border, like the experiences that Cristina and I had growing up, both of us being fronterizas from the Paso del Norte region, which is El Paso, Texas, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, and then we throw in Las Cruces, New Mexico as well up the road. It was the way that families could make ends meet is to cross the border to the pharmacies in Mexico or to have routine doctor's visits or even emergency visits, like visits to the hospital. That is a day-to-day, everyday, average, ordinary experience for mothers along the US-Mexico border that many people don't necessarily think about. So, of course, some of our testimonios that are included, and we have 30 contributors. Oh, wonderful. Barbara said in the chat that she was born in El Paso and grew up in Las Cruces and had many family in Juarez. So that idea of coming from these spaces, very mercurial and flexible geolocations, really defines what mothering at the border means and what we work to elaborate and develop through the concept of the book title, Frontera Madrehood. So I want to just share with your audiences what the book looks like, the book cover, and then Frontera Madrehood. So again, the idea of crossing borders daily for routine reasons is part of the epitome of what Frontera Madrehood, the concept, theoretically and literally means, is crossing borders, crossing boundaries, barrios, learning from our barrios, from our hood, and what that means, and building on those opportunities and those practices of speaking to networks of comadres like this group of women to find out where's the best place to buy groceries crossing to Ciudad Juarez, for instance, or the best doctors. What to say when you're crossing borders to state agents, both in Mexico, crossing southbound and then also northbound. So all of those ideas and experiences really tease out the conceptual framework of this book and how we had this deep desire, this longing to be able to share those stories, not just our own Maria Cristina and mine, but also the women that we have worked with for a good span of almost 3 decades. And those stories, those testimonials are incredibly powerful. So the 30 contributors that gifted us with their story by having it included in this book is the essence of what Frontera Madrehood means.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, you've done all this research and analysis on the border, and you could have just published it in a series of articles on sociology or anthropology journals, but you published a book, which is an intensive endeavor. Now, and I think it's going to have a bigger impact. But why did you do that? I mean, what was the impulse to write a book?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One of the goals that we wanted to achieve with Frontera Madrehood, was to give the women of the border a space to tell their own stories. We didn't want them to be our respondents or somebody that we interviewed. We wanted them to give them the agency to voice their situations in their own words, and which is something that they're not provided the opportunity to do that very often. A lot of times the voices of the border, the women are not represented, and much less brown activist moms, right? So this was something that was very important to us to highlight these very important women that were in the border communities who are not given the spaces that they deserve to be heard and to tell their stories in their own words. So that was something that was a very important part of Frontera Madrehood.
To include the brown women's voices.
Yes, absolutely. And for them to say it in their own words, not for us to interview them and them to be our respondents. Yeah, they wanted to write their own stories, and we wanted to give them a space for them to write their own stories and to take that agency and to be the writers and this the co-authors, right, in this book.
I got that. And I got that they were written in Spanish and translated to English. But I love the translations because they kept the voices of the speaker or the writer, very much so. So you could see the different personalities of the people and the different way they came at their challenges. Yeah. Now, I thought the book was, your first person accounts followed by the analysis. So you connected your personal experience, the people's personal experiences to your cultural understanding. And that really made the book accessible to me. So not just people who were scholars in sociology or in anthropology, to everybody. And at the same time, I thought the book went deep enough into the subject that it could serve as a textbook for college students. Who did you see as your target audience? Who was this for? Who was it for? Cynthia?
That's a great question as well. And I think we had a broad scope of understanding of who the audience members would be. But I think first and foremost, when Cristina and I were developing the concept and just thinking about the stories and the women that we have met over the course of our own work as academicians, but also as community members and community activists, it was important to have the book accessible to everybody. For the
Yeah.
mother who might be at the northern border, in Michigan or Montana or wherever, and think, there are bits and pieces of that resonate with me also as a border mom. And then also we're currently working to see how to find, or we are working actively to find a Spanish language press to publish this book. So if anyone has any ideas, please let us know, because it's important for us, for our contributors that are Spanish speaking only, to be able to see the breadth and depth of the book, to read it in its entirety and not solely their own work that they contributed. So we thought about undergraduate students, graduate students, of course, human rights defenders, legal practitioners who would have easy accessibility to this book, scholars, of course, both individual scholars, private scholars, and academicians as well. And also, I think it's a book that anybody who identifies as being from a neighborhood that is lovingly called the barrio, would be able to resonate, kind of pick up the book and say, wow, that tells my neighbor's story, or that is telling my story. And I think that hit me when we're just really thrilled that the book has received 2 book awards in the past 2 years, very quickly in 2025 and 2026. And one of the reviewers basically just wrote a very easy to remember reference of it, hit close to home. And I think that's what really it encapsulates and epitomizes what we were trying to do, is to have a book that was not a novel per se. It was not a fact-finding book that was just like chock full of statistics, but it was something that would sit with people for a very, very long time. And it is a difficult book to get through, but I think it's necessary if people want to learn about the US-Mexico border. I think people want to and should learn about the survivability of people at the border and the forms of everyday belonging and resistance, and that the border is a beautiful place with its desert landscapes, even with its lack of water, and it's like just true grit environment and the difficulty that is presented to the people that live here. It's a beautiful place, and the people are beautiful also.
Yes. Now, the book has, as we said, a large subject, but you managed to organize it in the book, and you organized it into 3 sections. Can you tell us about that? I think Cristina was. Could you tell us
Sure, I'll
about
get us
that?
started and then I'll pass it on to Cynthia to talk about some of the other sections if you want to do that. But we start off with the survival in the face of violence. And that book, it's opened up by our own testimonial on how we came to develop Frontera Madrehood. We talked about being in the local El Paso parade and the transition that the parade underwent when we were children, from being very cultural, having matachines, mariachis, to being a display of the militarization of the region, and how that forced to have these tough conversations with our young children at the time. And so we start off with our own testimonial, and then do you want to talk about Doña Daire and Paula's testimonio, Cynthia?
Sure. So Cristina and I have worked together for 25 years. We've published together and have built our budding professional lives, but also our personal lives together. And with that said, we did a lot of community work in the El Paso region and also Ciudad Juarez. One of the mothers that's just really near and dear to us and is a muse for the book is a woman who's represented in the book cover, and her name is Paula Bonilla Flores, whose daughter was killed in 1998. She was a victim of feminicide, and her story of just resilience is such a beautiful, impactful one of the work she's done in the community. In part one, we tell some hard-hitting stories like that of Paula Flores, of also Edith Trevino Espinosa, that whose children witnessed the assassination of her father in a case of spillover violence, and then also of a grandmother from Nogales, Arizona, who has worked in advocacy and created an organization, a network to argue against border violence by state agents. And in this case, her 16-year-old grandson was killed by a Border Patrol agent in Nogales, Arizona, shooting into Nogales, Sonora, through the border wall. And so she has created a network called the Border Patrol Victims Network. So she writes about that, her love for her child, her grandson, and her advocacy work. And then from there, there's several other just incredibly compelling stories. The next section is part 2, confronting caging, migration, and deportation, which again is a significant section that chronicles migrant stories and migrant community workers along the entirety of the US-Mexico border. Maybe, Cristina, you can share the story of the sisters, Coda and Shama, and then we can go to the last section.
Sure. There is also a testimonial by 2 sisters that grew up in a mixed status family in South Texas. And the processes that they went through to try and get legalization for the sister that was undocumented. It's also a tough read because her family travels from South Texas to Juarez to go to their appointment at the embassy and they this is it's difficult because the sister undergoes a lot of difficult questioning, but also physical examinations that were very intrusive, ought to just be turned around and then denied a visa. And that painful situation, what it created, not just for her, but for her parents. And then having to come back again when having the opportunity to apply for a visa once again. And the agent insulting her mom, saying it's your fault that she's undocumented. You did this to her. And then the daughter standing up for her mom and saying, no, she's an excellent mother. She did everything she could for us. This is not her fault. This was a situation that was out of her control. And of course, the agent not being very happy that she stood up for herself and her mom and threatening them to not give her a visa. But eventually, she was able to get a visa. So it's a story about that hardship of what it's like to get legalized and to grow up in a mixed status family. And the last section is asserting rights. And that section, we wanted to make sure that we just didn't mention the struggles and in terms of mothering, doing mother work on the border, but also the advocacy and the strong will, right, that these women have in creating better lives, not just for their own children and families, but for the entire community.
Yeah. You know, there, because of, I think the violence at the border has increased. And as that has increased, so has the militarization on both sides. So, more and more people are carrying guns. Some of these gun carriers have badges, and others are just the criminals. So it must make everybody afraid. Everybody who lives in Juarez or in Tijuana, you don't know, you can't speak up. They might react. And you talk about the challenges and the fear and the effect this has on the children. Yeah, I think it was in one of the first uh, testimonials of the book. Can you comment on that?
Sure, sure. I want to reiterate, if it wasn't clear, if we didn't make it clear earlier, that half of the contributors to this collection live in Mexico, and
Mhm.
that our contributors represent the entirety of the US-Mexico border, both sides of the border. So again, it isn't just academics, it's everyday moms, it's community members, community activists, and then academic scholars from both sides of the US-Mexico border. One of our contributors beautifully wrote, her name is Maria Eugenia Hernandez Sanchez, and she's one of our dear friends and contributors and scholar. She wrote about what it was like to have the Mexican military presence in Ciudad Juarez, which is a sister city of El Paso, Texas, during a period that was just rife with cartel violence, with drug war violence. And the entrance of the Mexican military into Ciudad Juarez that had already just been saturated with other forms of violence, like the feminicides, for instance, and how everyday people had to adjust to the military presence on top of everyday policing, which was really incredibly difficult, and what it was like to see military presence in the grocery stores, carrying AK-47s, and the
Mm.
curiosity that her children had in asking questions in front of the military agents, like, do those men kill? Or the dangers that the children would have in either confronting the agents or even law
Mm.
enforcement agents. And conversely, I also want to share that it's somewhat similar when you're in heavily militarized places like El Paso, Texas, that holds Fort Bliss military base.
Mm.
And seeing just so much military presence, soldiers in uniform, it's for kids that are constantly crossing borders and, let's say, mixed status families. to have the presence of Border Patrol agents going to the grocery store, or picking up their children, or ICE agents kind of doing their own ordinary things. It's a different scenario. It's a different landscape. I share that my own child, my own son, who I write about in our book, in our collection a little bit, asked me last January if he and I were going to be deported. And I was dumbfounded that he had asked me that question as someone who is fourth generation in the United States, and my family was in this region before there was a border, and my son, who's half Latino, asking me that question. So it's challenging, it's daunting to raise children so close in proximity to the border because honestly, I feel they're thinking and wanting to ask questions that they're too terrified to ask. And there are gradations of fear that I think families have. So with all of the privilege that I might have, I never in 1,000 years would have thought my son would be thinking about that. And you can only imagine the children that come from mixed status families or children that have irregular status along the border and their families and the fear that they're experiencing. So I will say in the past almost year and a half, in my travels near the border, I have seen many a family packing up truckloads of their belongings and driving southbound. And so that's another image that has become too familiar in our region. At the same time, I think the United States is experiencing an awakening right now to see what it looks like to have, for instance, ICE agents working with TSA across the United States, or also ICE agents in places like Minneapolis that you never would have thought about before. So that's an inkling of what some community members experience along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these interviews. I want to congratulate you on this wonderful, authoritative, and essential book. And yes, thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to be able to share our work with you all.
I'm so glad you came to our group.
Yes,
Thank you.
so are we. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias, comadres.
Y gracias a ustedes.
Okay, our second interview is with Natalie Guerrero, an Afro-Latina writer and producer living in Los Angeles, California. After spending 5 years in traditional publishing, Natalie moved across the country to Los Angeles in 2020. Since landing in La La Land, Natalie has primarily worked as a development executive for Macro and M88 across their film, television, and representation verticals. After fundraising over $100,000 for the families of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd via social media, her essay on silence was featured in Hungry Hearts, a heartwarming anthology of essays published by Penguin Random House in 2021. Natalie co-authored Jennifer Lewis' NAACP-nominated book of essays, Walking in My Joy, which was published in 2022. Currently, Natalie has published her first novel, My Train Leaves at 3, while serving as the director of the Writers' Colony and walking her dog Tupac in the hills of Los Feliz. Interviewing Natalie is Dalma Llanos Figueroa, who was born in Puerto Rico and raised in the South Bronx. As a child, she was sent to live with her grandparents in Puerto Rico, where she was introduced to the culture of rural Puerto Rico, including the storytelling that came naturally to the women in her family, especially the older women. Her first novel, Daughters of the Stone, was listed as a 2010 finalist for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize. In 2020, the self-published paperback edition of Daughters of the Stone won the 16th Annual National Indie Excellence Awards for multicultural fiction. Her second novel, A Woman of Endurance, was published in 2022, and the Spanish language edition, Indomita, in 2022. Since her retirement, Dalma continues to dedicate herself to writing, speaking engagements, panels, and workshops. She resides in the Bronx with her husband, photographer Jonathan Lessup. Take it away, Comadre Dalma.
Buenas noches to everybody. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be interviewing Natalie Guerrero. And I will get right to the book right away because I
Okay.
have a lot of questions.
Okay.
First of all, congratulations
Thank you.
for your first novel. I can only imagine you receiving it for the first time and holding it in your hand. The first time it happened to me, I slept with it under my pillow because I
Yeah.
wasn't really sure that it was there. Um, I love the immediacy and authenticity of this novel. It puts us right there. And especially tonight, I think discussing these two books um, shows us the beautifully wide variety of Latinidad, from the frontera in the South to the Caribbean lifestyle in New York City, which seem like two completely different worlds. And in some ways they are, but in other ways they're tied together by deep cultural roots and familial importance. So that said, I'm going to get to my first question right away. Writing is a long, arduous journey that requires time, energy, and concentration and tenacity. I think every novelist gets to a point where they want to throw their book out the window because they've just had enough. But why did you invest so much time in this narrative? That is, what about this story did you feel needed to be told?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's so thoughtful. Why did I spend so much time on this novel? I think there was a sense of urgency about this story for me specifically. There was a very nagging um, feeling that I had when I thought about Xiomara, who's my main character, for everyone who hasn't read the book. And I kept kind of hearing her story, and it felt just like at the top of my pile in terms of urgency. And so I do often say I really do write for myself. It helps me work things out, and I also want to see, um, it also helps me kind of understand the world around me. And so I think Xiomara's story felt incredibly urgent. One, because I was really interested in the way women deal with rage and anger. Xiomara is a very rageful character, and I think right now in the world, there's a lot to be angry about. And I think that Xiomara had that kind of rage, but also just this passion that felt just like so incredibly urgent to me. Um, and then in terms of why I spent so much time on it, it felt so good. I mean, I started writing this book in 2022, and we were kind of still in the pandemic. I still feel like we're all in the pandemic in some ways. But I think that I had a surplus of time to write the book, and I also had um, kind of a now or never mentality about it. So I really felt like the character was my main reason for writing the novel at all, and kind of working out what her flaws were and what she was angry about and what was also possible for her, in the body that she was in and the grief she was feeling, all of that just felt important. And yeah, I had this kind of sense of urgency for whatever reason.
Okay, okay. Now, one of the things that I was really impressed by and struck by was the fact that New York City itself becomes a character in the book.
Mhm.
Um, why is the sense of place so important in the book? And how do the different parts of the city inform the novel?
Yeah, thank you for that. I love the setting in this novel. So my novel is set in Washington Heights, and I spent a lot of time. Washington Heights is a second home for me. My dad grew up in Washington Heights, and my grandmother is in Washington Heights, and I just feel such a big sense of community there. And I don't think it gets, I do a lot of reading, and especially I do a lot of New York reading. And I've never totally read something. I mean, of course, there are other amazing Dominican authors who have wrote about Washington Heights, so I won't claim to be the first one. But I do think that there is something so propulsive about the Heights that is very irreplaceable. And it's also not a place, I think that often it's written as a place that's hard to be, and it's not. And I wanted to really dispel that myth about Washington Heights in this book. It's the most infectious place to be. The food is amazing. Everyone knows everyone. Fulanito on the corner is your cousin. Like, you know what I mean? Everyone is together. And I really wanted just to set the Heights as the thing I see it as, but also to reframe New York City. Like when Xiomara leaves Washington Heights, that's when she's in a foreign place. And I was really important to me to kind of flip New York on its head in that when people talk about Washington Heights, I think often they talk about it as the foreign place. Like they get there and it's, whoa, it's a different part of New York. And I wanted to play with what it would it be like if when she left Washington Heights, that's when she's in a foreign land. And so the setting was very, very important to me, and I'm really proud of Washington Heights, and it's important and home to me in a lot of ways.
Okay. And for those of us who aren't New Yorkers,
Yeah,
can you
sorry.
explain the difference between Washington Heights and like the theater district
Sure.
um and
Yeah.
what was it, New Rochelle? I forget which of the
Yeah, New
suburbs.
Rochelle.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So Washington Heights is at the most northern tip of New York, of Manhattan, and it's now I see maps and they're calling it Little Dominican Republic, which is so funny to me because that's not necessarily what I've never heard it called that before until I saw it on Google Maps the other day. But it is essentially DR in New York City.
Okay.
There's just more Spanish there than there is English.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, I mean, truly, everyone is family. Everyone knows everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also not a central point for the rest of New York. If you're not from Washington Heights, you're probably not passing by it. There's no reason um it's not a place where you don't need to go through Washington Heights to get anywhere else in the city. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really if you're going there, you're going there. Um and it's also it's just like a melting pot for Caribbean, Puerto Rican, Dominican culture, and that is very different than the theater district where, it's tourism. It's
Mm-hmm.
homogenous in a way of like there's massive wealth in Times
Mm-hmm.
Square. And then similarly, like in the book when I talk about the suburbs, that is something that I wanted to also kind of juxtapose, which is um, Washington Heights is very close to the suburbs, actually. It's
Mm-hmm.
only 15, maybe 20 minutes away in a car.
Mm-hmm.
But the worlds are just completely different. In Washington Heights, everything is very close-knit and tight together. And just 15 minutes away, there's a place like New Rochelle where it's green lawns and overwhelming amounts of wealth and private
Mm-hmm.
schools, et cetera. And so that is what Washington Heights is, and the differences between them.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Another thing that struck me was the physicality of Xiomara. Her body just feels everything.
Mhm.
And she says, when I don't get what I want, my body moves before my mind does.
Yeah.
And how do you think that's reflected? I mean, one instance, let's say, in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I agree. Xiomara is a very physical character. I think that what she means by that is she doesn't give herself enough time to t think things through. She's a very impulsive character.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I think even in that passage, she's hears news that she doesn't want to hear, and before she can even, think through or
Mm-hmm.
process what she's heard, she's on the subway going to confront someone about
Mhm.
something. And I
Mhm.
think that there is that kind of like passion and impulsivity that I love about her, but it also can get her into a lot of trouble.
Mhm.
But her body is, I think her body holds all of her emotion.
Right.
Um, yeah, she doesn't talk
Right.
about her emotion as much until later in the book, but she's certainly holding it all in. Her body is keeping the score.
Okay. I also love the fact that you don't shy away from the issue of racism and colorism, both in the society and within our own community. So can you speak a little bit towards that?
Yeah. I mean, famously or infamously to my aunt, the first line of my novel is Mejorar la raza, which is,
Mhm.
I think we've all heard that phrase, or if we haven't, it's something that I heard a lot while I was growing up from like my aunts in DR or my aunts in Florida, which is to say that if you're darker skinned, you should marry someone who's lighter skinned so that you can quote unquote better the race. And
Mhm.
it always has just been something that is like I mean, I hate that phrase. I think it's
Like,
just so disgusting. It's
yeah.
nailed on a chalkboard, exactly. And I wanted to talk about it openly, but also I was writing Xiomara as, um, you know, she's not me in a lot of ways, but I wrote her and a lot of her emotional truth I really connect with. And I thought, um, there's no world where you're living in a black body as a Latina that you haven't heard that phrase or that you
Mhm.
haven't experienced that kind of feeling or kind
Mhm.
of being told, that you're a subset of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
like you're a subset of being
Right.
Latina. And so I wanted her to experience that. And there's also a lot of stuff when you're, I think, becoming a woman in the world of wanting to feel beautiful and what are the beauty
Mhm.
standards. And that's not necessarily exclusive to
Mhm.
just her race, but I think there's a lot of investigating for her to do about why she feels the way she feels and when she's projecting versus when it's being projected onto her, because I think that's
Mhm.
also the case sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, and so she's experiencing that all in live time. And again, she's a deeply feeling character.
Mhm.
She feels it a lot.
No, but Xiomara is a young woman,
Mhm.
and she's a young Dominican woman who is a New York native. And she and her mother, come to, all kinds of conflicts.
Mhm.
Um, so can you speak a little bit about the mother-daughter relationship in the book?
Yeah, I think that the mother-daughter relation, they do come into a lot of conflict, but I ultimately think that it's one of the more loving relationships in the book, and I hope
Mhm.
that it came across that way. I really, you know, Xiomara has a really hard time with her mom and that they see things differently and they see her dreams differently, and they ultimately see the place of a woman in society, I think, a bit differently. But at the end of the day, I also think that there's a will to protect Xiomara that she does not have
Mhm.
at the beginning of the novel that her
Mhm.
mom is trying to step in for. And that
Mhm.
can feel like, for lack of a better word, incredibly annoying.
Mhm.
When you feel like you don't have autonomy, especially in the house you live in, but then you also don't have the means to get out of that house because of the financial situation that you're in. I think it can be, um, of course, you're gonna
Mhm.
kind of clash.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I think her mom wants better for her, and
Mhm.
Xiomara isn't giving herself the opportunity to get better. And so,
Mhm.
whatever the ways in which her mom tries to parent her that either do or don't work, I do think they're always coming from the right place.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's hard, I think, for Xiomara to see that.
Mhm.
Um, and she's also of a different generation, right? Like
Right.
Xiomara is not an immigrant herself. And
Mhm.
so that's a completely different way of growing up in America when you aren't
Mhm.
from your parent country, but
Mhm.
your parents are. That's a completely different, you have a completely different language.
Mhm.
And I think that that's true for all immigrants,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
first generation and second generation. and the ways they encounter the world and deal
Mm,
with, and the need to protect versus the need to have American individualism, right? It's my
yeah,
right to do whatever I want, right?
totally.
So, um, another theme, well, not theme, but another situation in the novel is that there are a lot of opposites,
Mm,
right? Both characters, locations, and people who are just opposites of other people in the book. So,
mm.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I like that observation. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean?
Okay, for example, you have Santi, and then
Yeah,
you have
Manny.
um, Manny, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, that's a great example. Yeah, so I was especially interested in Santi and Minnie. They're such different characters, and for people who haven't read, I won't spoil, but Santi is this kind of like fun, loving, calm force in Xiomara's life that really like allows her to exhale. And Manny is someone in her life who really has her like holding her breath and her heart fluttering. And I was really like, I think at the time when I was writing it, wanting to explore what it means to be like what are the ways in which we need to check our nervous systems at the door? What are the ways that like we need to also like observe how other people make you feel? And I don't necessarily mean like what they make you think, but like really where is your body when um you are around other people, and is it calm or is it kind of like completely uh erratic. And so I wanted those characters specifically to juxtapose each other. But then I even think like Cassie and Maria, for example, who are one of Xiomara's cousins and another of Xiomara's friends. They're completely different in the way that they move through the world. And that's New York, I think, too. Like you can exist in so many ways in New York City. There's no one way to do it, but I think Xiomara also is trying to figure out who she is, and she kind of can't look, she doesn't really have an example anymore of
Mhm.
who she wants to be, especially now that her sister is gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also don't want to give away much of your story, so I don't want to
Okay.
get into a lot of other
Spoilers.
questions. Um,
Okay.
Tell me about the title. My train leaves at 3.
Yeah, sure. The title came to me in a like quite a personal moment actually, and I'd always had this title kind of in the back of my mind, but I never found a book that I'd always been writing, and I'd never like found a story that was like fitting enough for the title. And then when I started writing Xiomara's story, it felt so much about transition and movement and how to get from here to there that there is a line at the end of the book where she says that verbatim, and that's I don't think that's much of a spoiler, but there is something just about like really how to get from one place to another and also liminal space that I am really interested in. And so I found Xiomara's story was kind of perfect for the, where is she going title.
Hmm.
And she like basically lives on the subway the whole book. She's on the subway, she's on the Metro North, she's here, she's there, she's just
Hmm.
constantly in motion.
Hmm.
And I think I had a lot of questions about what that means to be constantly in motion. Um, and so the title felt very, very fitting.
Right. And
Yeah.
if you look at the whole book as her journey, right, it's
Totally.
just a long journey.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want to get a little bit away from the actual book to ask you a little bit about you.
Sure.
Um, what are some of the writers that you've read that have either influenced how you write or that you admire and think of as literary mentors?
hmm Definitely Angie Cruz. I think that when I read Dominicana for the first time, I was just like, I can't believe this exists. Like, I
Hmm.
just couldn't even handle it. And then I love Audre Lorde. She's really influenced how I think about what you are and are not allowed to say on the page.
Hmm.
Lily King is a writer who's a bit more contemporary, who I really look up to. She is just like so incredibly masterful with her words and tells the story so succinctly and so quickly, but it's like so deep and so powerful. What other writers? I will say, like, not a famous writer, but my grandmother was always journaling and writing and letting me read what she was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really looked up to that. And she was just also a reader, like she is a big reader. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think about her a lot in terms of like mentors and mentorship. Um, who else? Yeah, I think that's
Those are your big
yeah,
ones.
those are my big
Yeah.
ones. Well, I should
Okay.
also say Nikki Giovanni. I'm like looking at her book right now. I just read a lot of her poetry, and
Mm-hmm.
she also allows a different kind of language. I think when I was writing this book, I thought like, oh no, if I write about big feelings, powerful thoughts, sexuality, am I not going to be taken seriously as a writer? I think someone like Nikki Giovanni really allowed me to be like, no, you can say whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm always big on advising emerging writers, whatever their age, that we we don't have enough of our stories told. We have too many stories not told. So, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about writing, who would like
Yeah.
to write, um, in terms of giving them, not that they need it, but I know when I was starting, I needed permission to say, you're a writer. It took me a while to figure that out. So, what would you recommend?
Yeah. I think that I had that too. I think that
Mhm,
I have that still. But I think that it's important to kind of like claim it before you believe it yourself.
mhm,
Especially in this industry, no one's going to believe something about you that you don't already believe about yourself. So if
mhm.
you're walking around saying, I don't know if I'm a writer, no one's going to
No,
believe that you are.
exactly.
To kind of fake it till you make it, but also just from like a craft perspective is really keep going. I read something the other day that really I'm finishing up my second book now, and it really inspired me. And it was I forget who said this, but it was the writing either gets better or it gets easier, but it can't be both. And
Mm,
I think that's really true and really powerful, especially in fiction. It's like if you want your next thing if you're coming up against the wall, it doesn't mean you're not a writer. It means your writing might be getting better. You're challenging yourself, but I think it's such a raisin in the sun moment for a writer to stop or abandon a piece that they're working on.
mhm,
So I think it's from a craft perspective, really to keep going and really to
mhm,
keep writing, and
mhm,
also to finish. I think it's really important to finish something. It's not necessarily you don't have to finish your novel this year, but write a short story to prove to yourself that you can finish something. Um, I think a lot of writers stop because
great advice.
they stop right in the middle, and it's like just finish it and then fix it later.
Okay, very good. Um, and the last thing I would ask is, um, can you tell us just a little bit about your next book? If you
Uh,
would rather not, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I can say that my next book is extremely political.
Okay.
And
This is
that's
a
all
good
I can
time to
say
be
because,
extremely clear.
yeah, that's all I
Yeah.
can say because I know my agent would be actually she keeps telling me, like, you cannot tell anyone about this until we finish up some other business stuff with it. And I respect her a lot. So I won't disobey her wishes. But my next book is extremely political, but also I've fallen in very deep love with my main character again. And yeah, it asks a lot of, I can say that the main question I'm asking myself is what are you allowed to desire in a world that is kind of seems to be constricting?
Yeah.
And can you want more when
Okay.
so many people have less?
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
your
you
thoughts
so
with us.
much.
Really enjoyed hearing your voice outside of the covers of your book.
Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
thank you. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Cristina and Cynthia and Maria and Dalma and Natalie. They were great interviews. Very great. We appreciate your being with us. And we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the authors here today and their publishers, University of Arizona Press and One World, for generously donating books to our early registrants. And a special thank you again to our interviewers, Comadre Maria and Dalma. We appreciate our audience joining us tonight and submitting their thoughtful questions. Most importantly, we want to recognize our dedicated volunteers without whom this book club and its associate work would not be possible. Mil gracias. And it's because of them that we're celebrating our 20 years as a book club. So we're very appreciative of our volunteers. Supporting Latino authors is crucial to our mission. We encourage you all to write reviews on platforms like Amazon, Goodreads, and Barnes & Noble, as these reviews significantly impact publishers and potential readers. Consider purchasing books to directly support our authors. And if your local library lacks the title you're interested in, don't hesitate to request it. They can order it. We also invite you to buy a copy and donate it to the library. Donate it to a friend. We invite you to attend our virtual book clubs. We have book clubs in 12 cities, and bring your friends along. Remember that our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Looking ahead, our April books, which start tomorrow, is The Cadapul Flower, poems by Kimberly Vargas Agnasi, and Portrait of the Artist as a Brown Man by Jose Hernandez Diaz. Thank you again for your continued support of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. Please join me in celebrating our book club by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Let's applaud and amplify diverse literary voices throughout the year. Thank you again for being here with us. Thank you to the authors, the interviewers, all our audience, all our readers. Thank you. Good night. And always read Latino Lit. Good night.